I'm already pissed. So that new Hunger Games book came out. Last month, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by homegirl Suzanne Collins came out. My thoughts for this book are so incoherent, and I don't know if that's because this book is so incoherent, but I just want you to know that as a result of that, this video is gonna feel incoherent. And I don't know who to blame, but it's probably me.
Strange things have happened here, stranger would it be?
So basically, this book starts out and it's the 10th Hunger Games, and we're following our homeboy Coriolanus. And I just want you to know, I'm not saying that freaking name in this video. He's gonna be young hot President Snow for the sake of it. So young hot President Snow is living his best life. He's in this freaking academy thing it's called, where they're like learning how to be evil dictators. And the problem is that he is so poor, and as a result of that, he is so sad. And on top of that, the Hunger Games, it's like in its 10th year, you know, and the ratings are down. The people in the districts, they don't care about the annual child murder that they're forced to witness. I'm not making this up. We're gonna get all these academy kids and we're gonna have them mentor the tribute. So young hot President Snow gets assigned a tribute, and she's a freaking crazy person. When she gets reaped, she has like a snake in her shirt, and the snake like attacks another girl. The peacekeepers beat her up, and they drag her on stage, and then she sings like a song, and everybody starts like singing along with her. While they're preparing for the Hunger Games, people keep escaping. There's even one scene where they take all the tributes to like tour the arena, because apparently that used to be a thing, and they're like literally in like a football field, and they're like, okay, so here it is. And while they're there, like a bomb goes off and everybody gets blown up. So the Hunger Games start, and Lucy Gray is living her best life because she has like literally like 5 other competitors. Lucy Gray decides her best bet is to hide under the ground. While they're in the arena, President Snow is watching from his bedroom, and then he sees one of his best friends who's called Sejanus. We don't know how, but Sejanus sneaks into the Hunger Games, and he's gonna like maybe like say something, but like we don't see what his plan is. We never hear what his plan is. It kind of feels like he accidentally got shot up the tube, and so they're like, we need someone to get him out of there. And so they send young hot President Snow to get him. He's like, come on, you're not supposed to be in here. And then he's like, yeah, you're right. And then they're walking out, but then a tribute is like, hey, I'm gonna kill you guys. And then President Snow like hits him in the head with a stick, and then he dies. Later on in the book, young hot President Snow is like smoking a cigarette in the Capitol, and he's like, yeah, that's pretty cool. My girl's got a good chance. We're in love, and I'm young, hot, and sexy. And so he's sitting there, and he's like, you know what? I randomly had this thought that the evil professor is gonna release evil snakes into the arena. We don't know how he came to this conclusion, but he's like, these snakes are gonna kill everyone. And so what he does is he gets a little like tissue from Lucy Gray, and he throws it in with the snakes. The snakes get released into the arena, and then Lucy Gray starts to sing to the snakes as she emerges from the rubble that she was hiding in. And she sings to them, the snakes swarm to her, and she forms an army of snakes. And then they proceed to wipe out every tribute, and she wins. You might be like, oh, is that the end of the book? No, we're only halfway through. And so after she wins, President Snow's like, yeah, that's right, I'm young, hot, and sexy. And the Capitol people that are in charge, they're like, hey, hot, sexy, young president man, you come with us for a second. And he's like, that's right, I'm so young and hot and sexy. And so then they're like, why did you put that hanky in there? You idiot, you rebelled against the Capitol, and that's bad, by the way. And so then they're like, you know what? We know we promised you this money, but no. And so like, you get to be a peacekeeper now, idiot. You pick a district that you want to go to. And so then he's like, you know what district I want to go to? District 12, because my woman is there. And so he goes to District 12, and he lives there. He lives literally in Katniss's like actual backyard. And so somehow young hot President Snow finds out that Sejanus, the anus man, he finds out that he is the rebel. He decides, I'm gonna murder Sejanus in cold blood. And so after this, he's like, you know what? I want Lucy Gray and me to go have a marriage together. So President Snow runs out there to meet Lucy Gray, and then she's like not there. And then like the birds start screaming, and then he sees like a snake, thinks he sees her, and he like shoots his gun. And then he's like, yeah, she's probably dead. And then somehow the Capitol is like, hey, we saw that you murdered that girl maybe, and also murdered your friend for no reason. I guess we'll have you be the president now. And then the book is over.
Strange things have happened here, stranger would it be?
I would say the weirdest thing to me is how completely irrelevant this book is. There was really nothing in this book that changed much of President Snow's character in the original trilogy, or even anything about the original 3 books. I just feel like the character of young hot President Snow is so confusing as well, because you really think that she's gonna do something with him or like say something about him that like is gonna give us more introspection about who his character is in the original trilogy, but we don't get that. I'm gonna put this here because I don't want to touch it anymore. And there are so many scenes in this book that like you think are going to be something, but they never really are. I've seen so many reviews too where people are like, President Snow is so similar to Katniss. That adds so much dimension to his character. I mean, maybe they do like rebel slightly, but from what I remember about Katniss, she actually had like a personality and a consistent motive.
Strange things have happened here, stranger would it be? If we met
This book literally felt like an SNL sketch, y'all, and I ain't even freaking kidding. They keep trying to do the Hunger Games, okay? And they keep getting all the tributes ready, and they're like, let's get all these people killed, guys. All these people keep freaking dying before the Hunger Games, and at first it was like, oh, this girl got bit by a murder snake. And at first it was like, whoa, that's kind of weird. But then it like kept happening, where it's like the whole arena got bombed and 10 of the tributes got killed, and like 2 of them escaped, and like a bunch of them are in the hospital. Is it that hard not to murder all these children? Can't even like go a couple days without killing half of them? This has gotta be a joke. This book really freaking felt like fan fiction. I'll freaking say it. I don't want to read about this snake woman using her poison to kill people. I want to read about not that. I was really dragging my freaking feet for the first 150 pages of this book, and so I was really holding out a freaking prayer that once the Hunger Games started, things would be looking up. You could make the argument that like maybe you're one of those idiots that like only likes the Hunger Games for the Hunger Games and like not the like intricacies of warfare. Like, shut up, idiot. I was excited to see some children get murdered, straight up. And so we get there and I was like, freaking shoot him in the face. We find out that the Hunger Games, first of all, is shot in a football field. But second of all, we find out that there's like one freaking camera, and a majority of the tributes are underground for the Hunger Games. And so there will literally be scenes where they're like, this guy is sitting there. We don't see Lucy Gray for like 50 pages. I want to see her like get away from tricky situations and like hiding and, you know, using her wits to outsmart people. Like, I was eager to see that, but no, literally she sits underground for the entire Hunger Games. She sits underground. And then she emerges because her friend got rabies. Like, I literally felt like I was like reading the fan fiction that I read in 2013 called Pregnant in the Hunger Games. When the girl won, they were literally like, and then I won. And I was like, what? That was stupid. And maybe she was just eager to get away from like the Hunger Games. But if you're eager to get away from the Hunger Games, why did you write a new book? Like, I understand that she already wrote 2 books that were like fully in the Hunger Games. And so I'm not being like, I want to see people get killed. But like, we've seen that before. And I understand that. And maybe like it would be boring to read again. Honestly, I think it might be boring. Everybody's name in this book, by the way, ends with anus. We got Coriolanus. We got Sejanus. I was starting to feel like my name was Calanus, you know? Like, I was just like, so many anuses. There's a character in this book who perfectly displays how awful the writing is in this book. His name is Dean Highbottom. But this character, he exists just so he can say that President Snow sucks. That's all he does in the whole book. Like, we'll literally get scenes where President Snow will be like talking to people, and then Dean Highbottom will like come up from behind him like, idiot. You suck, by the way. When President Snow gets in trouble after Lucy Gray wins, Dean Highbottom is there. He's like, haha, idiot. Have fun being an idiot. I saw so many people talking about this book and they're like, there are so many Easter eggs. Like, but no, there freaking weren't. What are you talking about? I'm gonna try to think of one right now. You know what? There is an Easter egg. And this Easter egg makes me pissed. Guess what, everybody? Lucy Gray, she is the writer of The Hanging Tree, everybody. She saw a man get murdered and he called for his lover to flee. And they met at midnight by the hanging tree. Because he got hanged in the tree. And there's this Easter egg where while the Hunger Games are going on, we'll see random characters that we don't know say things like, wow. It's so crazy that the tributes don't know when other tributes die. We should add a signal. So not only the people in the arena will know when someone dies, but other people outside of the Hunger Games will know. Perhaps a cannon? Maybe we'll even show their face in the sky. And then there's even lines where they're like, wow, guess what, everybody? Because for no reason, this arena got bombed before the Hunger Games. What if every year we made the arena different? Like, is that an Easter egg? Like, and I don't even feel like it's an exciting thing to learn about. You know how the cannons and the faces in the sky came to be? Because some guy said, we should do this. And then they did. I could have just assumed that.
Strange things have happened here, stranger would it be?
In the original trilogy, I will say, the names were freaking whack, straight up. Suzanne Collins really gave up the gimmick of trying to make names that sounded cool. I wrote a list of some of my favorite stupid names. Let's see how you feel about them. We got Professor Agrippina Sickle. I'm a Agrippina Sickle, if you know what I'm saying. There's a scene where a character is like, there's a seamstress that I know. Her name is Fabricia Whatnot. My personal favorite name comes from a peacekeeper in District 12. His name was Beanpole. Beanpole, come on, get your dinner. We got Smiley and we got Bug. His name was Bug. I was thinking there was gonna be a guy called Plant. I think it's a big missed opportunity that Bug didn't have an identical twin brother called Fish.
Strange things have happened here, stranger would it be?
I really did think that this book would have a lot more retcons than it did. I feel like it was actually kind of well done because I felt like I had a better understanding of the evolution of the Hunger Games. There's no sponsors, there's no interviews, there's no nothing. They literally get the tributes and then throw them in the freaking zoo and they sit in a cage and then they just throw them out there and they haven't eaten in like a week. So a lot of them will just die when they start, which is probably why it was called the Hunger Games. And I don't know if like starving them beforehand was intentional, as if they're trying to get each other to eat each other. I think Tigress is in this book, but also that Tigress, you remember the Tiger Woman? Apparently Tigress is young hot President Snow's cousin. And I don't remember if that was something that we knew in the original Hunger Games book. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a small tidbit, but I kind of feel like even if it was something we knew, we didn't need to see it. I just remember they were like, she is so botched, we don't even want her here anymore. Is that why she was mad at him? Maybe he was like, hey Tigress, I've got a really good plastic surgeon. And then like, it was just awful.
Strange things have happened here, stranger would it be?
Writing, bad. The writing in this book felt like long-winded, confusing paragraphs that would go on for so long, where I was starting to convince myself that it was all a fever dream, that I fanficked this in my head, and that I'm gonna wake up soon and it is gonna be 2013 and there's gonna be a tablet open next to me with pregnant in the Hunger Games 3. I'm going to read an example from this book about how long-winded, confusing, and honestly shitty this writing is. Coral, Mizzen, and Tanner sat in the stands and made eating motions. Festus, Persephone, and Domitia all obliged them, and the 3 tributes shared the bread, cheese, and apples dropped by the drum. If you're gonna do a list of 3 things one more time, girl. Back in the studio, Lucky had brought his pet parrot Jubilee to the set, and he had several minutes to coax it to say hi handsome to Dean Highbottom, a depressed creature in the midst of battling mange, perched wordlessly on Lucky's wrist as the Dean folded his hands and waited. Oh, say it, come in. Hi handsome, hi handsome. I don't think it wants to, Lucky, said Dean Highbottom. What? There's literally 2 paragraphs about how Lucky Flickerman, which is its own problem. You're saying Caesar Flickerman's dad had the same job as him? I truly do feel like 200 pages could have been completely cut out from this book, which is crazy given the fact that this book is only 500 pages. And I honestly feel like, and this might be a hot take, I'm just gonna say it, but I've noticed it so much over the last couple of years where I realized that like when there's an author who writes a really, really popular series and does any kind of a follow-up to it, every single time the book is significantly decreased in quality. But on top of that, there's more editing mistakes, there's more grammar issues, but at the same time, am I just forgetting how to read?
Strange things have happened here, it's stranger would it be?
This book does this really weird freaking thing where it will like mention a piece of symbolism from the original trilogy, and it will try to make that symbolism for this book, but that symbolism isn't symbolism because it's not symbolism. You know what I'm freaking saying? You know how in the original trilogy, Katniss is given like a bunch of roses at the beginning of Catching Fire? When he first gives her roses, he's basically threatening her and saying like, I'm gonna kill you and your family. And so from that point on, roses are used as the imagery of his threat and also what Katniss has to lose. So tell me why in this book, like there's randomly scenes where he's like, yeah, I've got my roses. Like there's a scene where someone like gives him a rose. There's like a scene where he's like talking about how he likes roses. It feels so cheap. Like it literally feels like it was put in there so that the reader could be like, oh, he had a rose in the original book. Given the context of this book, the symbolism of the rose means absolutely nothing, and including it just kind of feels like you being like treating your reader like an idiot, I'll be honest. There's this scene where President Snow is in District 12 and he's talking to some random friggin' guy. Maybe it's Beanpole. The Mockingjays were never supposed to exist, saying that like hope was never supposed to exist after the war, and how he thinks that the Capitol should murder all the Mockingjays now to stop them from continuing to spread out. And then this random guy's like, oh, it's just another bird, you know, waka waka, like who cares that there's just a new type of bird? But it's like played off as like foreshadowing, you know, because like the symbol of hope is the Mockingjay. So President Snow, because he's evil, he's like, you know what? I think we should murder all the hope right now while we still can. And then some random guy's like, give it some time and hope will die down. Like as if the districts were gonna be like, you know what? I don't care that my children are getting murdered annually.
Strange things have happened here, it's stranger would it be?
I don't think that there was a single black person in this book either.
Strange things have happened here, it's stranger would it be?
Okay, I want you to hear me out for a second, okay? I feel like this book does this really upsetting thing where, in my opinion at least, I think it completely disregarded everything that Katniss did, everything that Katniss was, and the importance of her character as a whole. What Suzanne Collins decided to do was, instead of writing about a young, power-hungry President Snow sort of coming up into his person and into his power, she just wrote about Katniss if she was President Snow. President Snow rebelled against the Capitol to help somebody win the Hunger Games. He fell in love with the tribute. He lived in District 12. Like, it was just a lot of that, which kind of takes away the importance of Katniss to begin with. I always thought that the reason President Snow hated Katniss was because she was a lowly girl with no power, no influence, the opposite of who he was. She was able to rally the people against him in a way that nobody ever had. This book changes the entire dynamic of President Snow in the original series because I'm starting to realize that President Snow doesn't hate Katniss because of what she means to all the other people. He hates Katniss because of what she means to him. And that is, she reminds him of his dead freaking side hoe that he murdered. You know how Lucy Gray wrote The Hanging Tree? That kind of takes away from Katniss as well, because now she's here singing The Hanging Tree on TV for propaganda, and it kind of feels like instead of President Snow being angry that these people are singing this song and blowing up that dam, kind of feels like he's only sad because he liked the girl who wrote that song. Literally, it feels like every interesting avenue of the Katniss President Snow relationship and rivalry is like solely written off as like, oh, he just had a crush on a girl and she died. He murdered her, of course. I've also seen a lot of speculation that Lucy Gray is an ancestor of Katniss, and although President Snow maybe shot her in the back of the head and murdered her in the middle of the woods, that she may have escaped and gone back to District 12 at some point and got banged and had a baby or something, and that baby was Katniss's dad. You know what I'm saying? Like, come on now. And it's kind of sad, because I just can't imagine 10 years after writing one of the most beloved series in the world being like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna do it again, but bad.
Strange things that happen here, stranger would it be?
When this book was first announced, I was feeling immediately pessimistic about what it was going to be about. And then I found out that it was going to be about President Snow, and I found myself getting more excited for the book because of that. I know that turned off a lot of people, but I was actually kind of hyped. I thought the reason why Suzanne Collins was bringing back this series in the first place was to talk about modern politics in some way. I thought it was going to talk about corrupt system, abusing the powerless, and I thought it was going to be really timely. Was she trying to say that President Snow was a nationalist? Because I don't even think I feel that way. At the beginning of the book, I truly thought that President Snow wasn't super happy with the Capitol. Like, there's this scene where there's a character called Marcus, and after the arena is bombed, he like escapes or whatever. And so when the Hunger Games begin, we find out that he's been caught and he's like dangling off like a pole. He's like chained up like Jesus, and he's like up there, and President Snow is thinking to himself, he's like, this is awful, this is terrible. If he's so empathetic, why is he like totally down to be a part of this? Like, that's what I don't get. Is it's never described as him being a nationalist or like not seeing the problem with it. If he spent the whole book being like, well, he's rebel scum, these people are rebels, and like that's just what he was taught, I feel like that could be interesting. Like, these people are taught to hate people that they don't know or interact with. That's why certain people are like homophobic. That's why certain people are freaking racist, because they were raised that way. All of his friends seem to get screwed over. His family gets screwed over. Lucy gets screwed over. He's consistently seeing all of these things that are just awful that are happening. And then he's still, at the end, he's just like, okay, I'll come back. I honestly feel like if President Snow's origin was the fact that like he disagreed really strongly with the Capitol, and in order to thrive and survive and like have his family do well, he needed to work more in the Capitol and sort of work up in some sort of a power position, I thought that it was going to be like the system forced him up when he didn't want to and didn't agree with it. And I thought that it was going to maybe show him getting lost in the power a little bit. I thought it'd be more interesting if it followed him over the course of like 10 or 20 years of his career. It would have been cool to see him as this like sort of silly, optimistic young person who doesn't know what's going on and slowly working up in this position. Maybe he disagrees with it. And I thought it'd be interesting if slowly as the book progresses and slowly as he comes into his own, he starts to get more power, more influence on the Hunger Games, and slowly as the time goes on, he loses his humanity. I would have loved to see him like having like political meetings about like the districts, or maybe he's in a power position and then the districts are rebelling in some way and he has to shut it down. I would be really interesting to read about all of that instead of fanfiction love affair. It would have been cool to see, like, as time goes on, we see not only the Hunger Games change, but also President Snow change. We could have seen more politics, we could have seen cameos from some of our favorite victors that we know from Catching Fire. We could have seen a lot of stuff like that. Maybe we even could have gone as far as seeing Katniss at the beginning of her own Hunger Games and see President Snow being like, "Ooh, this is gonna be..." Something I realized while I was reading this book is I think maybe the reason why I had a hard time making my way through this book is because I first read the Hunger Games books when I was 11 and 12 years old, which, looking back on it, that's really freaking young. Because when I first got into this series, I don't even know if people fully understand the type of mindset I had when it came to reading. I used to make my own Hunger Games movies. I would write my own Hunger Games fan fiction where it would be a weird fanfic version of myself as the main character. I would literally run around in a field with my friends and we would make up ideas about different people we were fighting and different situations the Capitol was putting us in. And so I guess the way that I've always viewed the series is I've always viewed it in that nostalgia lens where I can't objectively really point out anything that's bad with them. The only thing I feel is just that sense of adolescent bliss. That sounds kind of sexual. Being a child and enjoying running around with a fake wooden knife. And I think maybe I went into this book and maybe I was expecting it to make me feel the type of way, and then it didn't. And I think that this book forced me to come to the realization that probably for the rest of my life, I'm never going to be able to read a book like I used to. I'm never going to be able to run around in a field with my friends and pretend that I'm this main character and that I'm rebelling against the government. I'll never feel that way again because I'm an adult now, and the way I read books is I'm just thinking about all the work I have to do later and all the schoolwork I have to do and all of that. Reading used to mean a lot to me, and I think that as I've gotten older, it stopped meaning a lot to me because I think in a way it sort of served its purpose for me. And maybe that's part of growing up. Maybe that's just the person I was. Maybe reading was only a hobby of mine for 2 or 3 years because I needed that to cling on to feel like I belonged to something in the world. Now that I'm older, I don't need that anymore. But at the end of the day, I know one thing, and it's that my love for this series was real. And this new book made it feel not real. So that's cool.
Strange things that happen here, stranger would it be?
I would say, as a whole, I'm freaking pissed. You decide to ghost the world for 10 freaking years and you come back with this? Why? Tell me why. Tell me why it ain't nothing but a shit book. Tell me why. Literally, after I finished reading this book, I had to rewatch clips from Catching Fire to like convince myself that I still liked this series, guys. That's how serious this is. So, should you read this book? No. I would say, if you are a huge fan of the Hunger Games. But then again, no, because I was a huge fan and this book was so bad and upsetting. The sad thing about this book isn't even about this book. It's that guaranteed, based on the fact that every single book I've ever enjoyed in the year 2013 is getting spin-off material, that means that Divergent is gonna probably have a prequel book. I'm calling it right now, straight up. It's gonna be about Triss's mom. I forgot that there's a poster in the back of this book. It says, "Read them all." To me, that sounds more like a threat. They're like, hey, we know you liked these 3, but introducing this piece of shit. I don't want to read that.